Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really powerful idea that could totally reshape our classrooms: personalized learning. It's all about ditching that old one-size-fits-all model and instead creating an education system that actually adapts to every single student. Okay, so let's start with that vision. Just picture it for a second. The student who's way ahead is tackling a cool enrichment project, another is getting some guided practice at exactly their own speed, and a third is showing what they've learned in a totally creative way. This isn't some far-off science fiction fantasy. It's the real promise of personalized learning.
But to really get why this vision is such a big deal, we first have to talk about the challenge that so many classrooms are up against right now. That traditional model, with its rigid pace and one-track curriculum, is really struggling to keep up with the diverse needs of today's students.
Think about it like this. On one hand, you've got the traditional model. It's kind of like a conveyor belt where every student is just expected to fit into the system. But the goal, what you see on the right, is a classroom that's more like a branching tree. The system itself is flexible. It adapts to how each student learns best. It's a huge shift from a rigid structure to something way more dynamic.
So what's the solution to this problem? Well, it's a concept that goes way beyond just, handing out different worksheets. It's an entirely new way of thinking about teaching, and it's called personalized learning.
Now, this isn't just about giving students slightly different assignments. Not at all. It's about fundamentally redesigning the whole learning experience. The pace, the style, even the content itself is tailored to the individual, instead of expecting every single student to fit into one standardized box. So how does this actually work? Well, it's really built on three key pillars. First, there's adaptive instruction, where the material literally changes in real time based on how a student is doing. Then, there's giving students a real choice and voice in their own learning journey. And finally, continuous feedback, so that assessment becomes this constant, helpful guide, not just some big, scary test at the end. Okay, but how do we actually make something like this happen in a real classroom with, say, 30 different students? The engine that makes this possible at scale is artificial intelligence. AI is the tool that gives a single teacher the superpower to personalize learning for everyone at the same time, something that was, frankly, impossible before.
For example, imagine a math lesson on fractions. The software instantly figures out who's flying through the material and who needs a little more help. For one student, it might offer up some really challenging new problems. For another, it might provide a quick review of a concept they need to shore up. The system doesn't just grade them, it analyzes their learning patterns to give them the right support at exactly the right time.
And here's what that looks like in practice. The teacher is still totally in charge. They're the one who identifies the need. But instead of spending hours and hours creating different materials for everyone, they can use an AI tool to generate perfectly leveled resources in seconds. This automates all that heavy lifting. Think about it. A teacher could get back 5, maybe 10 hours a week. That's time they can now spend doing one-on-one mentoring with their students. Now, this obviously brings up the elephant in the room, right? If AI is doing all this work, what happens to the teacher? There's this common fear that technology is going to replace educators, but in this model, the exact opposite is true. Technology actually elevates the teacher's role. What we're really seeing here is a fundamental shift. The educator moves from being the sage on the stage, the main person delivering all the information, to being the guide on the side. Their focus becomes less about lecturing to the whole class and way more about facilitating, coaching, and guiding students as they discover things for themselves. And here's the absolute key. AI can crunch the data, it can recommend resources, it can adjust the pacing, but it can't replicate that essential human connection. It can't read the frustration on a student's face, or spark curiosity with a perfectly timed question, or build the kind of trust you need for real learning to happen. That is the irreplaceable role of the teacher. So finally, let's look at the road ahead, because making this vision a reality isn't as simple as just buying some new software. It requires a ton of careful thought, planning, and a real commitment to putting human values right at the center of all this innovation. To get this right, we have to navigate some really serious questions. How do we use all this amazing student data without compromising their privacy? How do we make sure every student gets access, so this technology closes achievement gaps instead of making them wider? And this is critical. How do we make sure personalization doesn't just lead to isolation? The goal has to be finding that perfect balance between the incredible efficiency of AI and the irreplaceable wisdom of our educators. So the ultimate takeaway here is that personalized learning isn't about creating these automated, teacherless classrooms. Not at all. It's about liberating teachers from all those routine, time-consuming tasks so they can focus on what they do best: connecting with students, sparking their curiosity, and helping them grow.
And this leaves us with one final thought. The technology is here, the potential is crystal clear, but its success doesn't depend on the software, it depends on us, on educators, on administrators, on policymakers, and on whether we're ready to embrace this new, more human-centered way of teaching and learning.